And good morning or grand rising. Yeah, that was a beautiful greeting that we mastered last year as we were looking at last year's topic. And this year's topic, we're looking at this annual theme of rising higher and growing deeper. And if I haven't introduced myself to you, for anyone who might be new to our community, my name is Dr. Alice Reid, and I'm the spiritual director here at Centers for Spiritual Living, Capistrano Valley. And I'm so glad to be back with you this week. I was on a little trip last week to Vancouver, British Columbia. And I'm so happy to be back here in the States and be back here with my spiritual family as we look at these interesting topics that we are to cover this month in July. The theme is rolling in the deep, and we're invited to look at life through the lens of the ocean deep. We're invited to look at the ocean mammals and to see what they have to teach us about our own journeys of being in community and resilience and the unknown and the darkness that lies beneath us and our own consciousness that has things to share with us, beauty and power and things that we may not be aware of. And much of the wisdom for this month's topic comes from a sweet little book, and it's incredibly creative. It's called Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons and Marine Mammals, and it's more about life. It's more about how we can learn from our challenges and how we can learn from the things that we don't know about and how we can learn about things that scare us and how we can learn about things that are full of joy. Dave, last week, did an excellent job talking about, let's give Dave Freeman a hand. He did this wonderful job of drawing out this metaphor, looking at dolphins and how they're inviting us to embody the playful, intuitive, and community-oriented spirit of their nature. He encouraged us to reconnect with our inner wisdom and foster deep connections with each other and trust the currents of our life as they move us. And so it was a wonderful metaphor for this thing we call spiritual growth and our spiritual path and journey. And I think sometimes we need a completely different lens to help reground us in this thing called the spiritual path. I don't know about you, but I've been doing this for a long time. I have been exploring spiritual paths and spiritual principles in one form or another for over 40 years. And so when an author like Alexis Gumps comes along and begins to draw parallels to the spiritual journey and marine mammals, I'm like, that's cool. What does she have to teach me? And so this week, the talk title, Breathe, it's Shark Week. Shark Week, really. So my job today is to explore what sharks, Ernest Holmes, New Thought Spirituality, Fear, and Oppression have in common. What? What did she just say? There are some common grounds here that we can look at. But I want to start by scrolling back in time to 1975. In 1975, Steven Spielberg wrote and produced and introduced us to Jaws, right? Remember Jaws? That was like 50 years ago. Yeah, I know. 1975, 50 years, that's hard for me to fathom sometimes. So when that movie came out, I was 13 years old, just on the brink of leaving that age of innocence and into teenagerhood. And this movie, Jaws, came out, and I lived in Long Island, New York, and we lived in Glen Cove on the Sound, and in the summer we would drive across the island to Jones Beach in the ocean. And when Jaws came out, it changed my relationship to the ocean. I suddenly, before I would frolic in the waves, completely oblivious of what was in the ocean. And then suddenly I had this deep, unexplainable fear of going in the water. And I think what this little metaphor teaches us is that we are expert at manufacturing fear out of nothing. We can manufacture fear like nobody's business. We can make up things, we can make up stories, we can, with the whole media of film and movies, it's like mass consciousness shifts, and all of a sudden we're all afraid of sharks, right? Anybody not have that experience in 1975? All right, good for you. You probably knew a little bit about sharks. That's the difference. So here are a couple facts about sharks that I want you to know. In your lifetime, the odds of being attacked by a shark are 1 in 375 million. 1 in 375 million chance of being bit by a shark. And that compares to, you have a 1 in 100, and I don't want to manufacture fear with this, but you have a 1 in 100 chance of dying in a car accident, compared to 1 in 375 million. So kind of get some perspective with this. There's also a 1 in 560,000 chance of you drowning in the beach. So this idea of fear of sharks is completely unrealistic. And I think it's important for us to recognize where we manufacture fear. On Drowned, she talks about sharks, and she shares with us a couple of, she calls them lies about sharks. And the reason I think this is important is because we tend to believe things without investigating. We make things up. We begin to create this whole world within ourselves without understanding the greater truth. And there's always something more for us to discover. And so Alexis Pauline Gumbs writes that 3 lies about sharks that humans have used to justify their own violence and alienation that sharks will no longer tolerate. So one is that sharks travel alone. The translation, the lie that cultivates in our culture is that we have to cultivate our sharp individuality. You know, there's this thing in our culture where it's like, pull yourself up from the bootstraps, and we need to be all individuals, and we need to mark our trail. But the truth is that sharks don't travel alone. They often travel in packs together in community of their own. The second lie is that sharks are powerful and effective because they hide. And the translation of that lie in our culture is that no one will love you if they see all of who you are. No one will love you if they see all of who you are. How many have bought into that crap? Right, not true at all. And then the third one is that sharks spend more time sharpening their teeth than opening their gills. I don't know about that. But they are a fascination to us, and when we begin to investigate our fears, when we begin to sort of pull the veil back and to look at what it is that we are afraid of, then we can lean in to see where the gifts are, what it is that we can learn from those things that scare us. 1975 was also a time in the U.S. culture, and I did a little research about that, and that was the Vietnam War was finally over, and then there was Watergate, right? You remember Watergate? For those of youngins who might be listening to that was the time when there was a big scandal about bugging the one political party bugging the other political party. I don't want to bias you if you don't know the story about that. But this whole time in 1975 created a great deal of mistrust. mistrust for institutions, mistrust for the government. And we can see the seeds that were planted so very long ago are blossoming in today's environment, right? And yet it's up to us to investigate, to lean in, to look at the different sides of things, to have a greater understanding of what's going on, as opposed to the fear manufacturing machines that we are. What do we really need to be concerned about? What is within our power to control? What is it that whatever is being stirred up in us is bringing up for us so that we have an opportunity to express our power? The other thing about sharks is that they are powerful beings, but we don't celebrate their power. We fear it because we have a 1 in 375 million chance of being bitten by one. So we create this relationship with power that's unhealthy. And I've often said that the egoic relationship with power is power over, but the compassionate community-based relationship with power is power with. That together in community, when we are enjoying those fruits of community that Dave talked so beautifully about last week, that there's a different kind of power we begin to have a relationship with. It is a power of community. It's the power of the divine that's within us that wants to reflect itself back and forth to each other in our relationships. If we only look at things at the surface, if we only look at the top level of things, we tend to look at life through our disappointments. We tend to look at life through lack or limitation. We allow our fear to keep us small. We allow our disappointments to keep us shut down. I had a remarkable experience last week that I want to share with you. I was traveling to Vancouver to be at a convention. I was expecting 60,000 of my dearest friends to join me in Vancouver, and I decided to take a little side trip to Victoria. And so I rented a car, and I bought a round-trip ticket on a ferry, and I had to drive my car onto the ferry, and it took an hour and a half to get to Victoria, and then I'm just wandering around Victoria. I've got by myself, I've got no place to be. I'm parking my car, I'm paying for my parking, or I'm trying to pay for my parking because somebody's really having kittens about trying to use the parking machine. I've been there. And so I'm chill. I'm completely chill. I'm relaxed. I'm loving life. I'm letting God flow through my life. And I'm watching people walk by and bicycles ride by. And who should ride by on their bicycle but my old boyfriend from Santa Cruz? Oh, yes. I was on his bicycle. Like, what? Well, of course, I call out his name, and he turned around, and we just stood there smiling at each other. And it was a beautiful encounter. And I share this story with you because when that relationship ended, my heart shut tight because it was painful. It's always painful to end a relationship. And I hadn't realized how closed my heart was until I saw this beloved. Now, David and I had a difference of opinion about where we wanted to live, but we still love each other very much, and we were really good friends, in addition to being in a relationship. So I'm standing there in Victoria, and I'm looking at this beautiful soul, and my heart just opens up. And this is the thing that can happen for us when we are willing to be open. Now, there's a little bit more to the story. Bear with me. In the 5 days that I was in Vancouver, David was headed to Vancouver as well. He was in an RV, had his bikes. We were on the same ferry together coming back, and I kept bumping into him at the convention. And in the 5 days that I had the pleasure of being in and around David in one form or another, I also had the pleasure of sort of reliving the pattern of our relationship. and at the end of those 5 years, it was easy for me to just protect myself and shut down. But at the end of these 5 days, I made a conscious decision to lean into my resistance to see why I would have this opportunity to rekindle this friendship. So and that required that I look beneath the surface. That required that I feel my fears, because I have a beautiful, tender heart. And here I am faced with this person that broke my heart in one form or another, because for whatever reason. And here I had an opportunity to lean into my fear, to lean into those places that scare me, and to stay open. And I could do that because of you. I could do that because of Ernest Holmes. I could do that because of this philosophy that has taught me. I could do that because I was checking out sharks. I was looking at this possibility of the things that scare me, that on the other side of that, there might be some real power there for me. There might be some gifts to glean. There might be something else that I can learn about myself. And that's the thing about the things that scare us. We are at choice. When we come across something in life that frightens us, that knocks us off kilter a little bit, that shifts our lens a little bit, are we brave enough to look beneath the surface, to see what it is that life is offering us? Because it's all an invitation. In the grand scheme of things, each one of us is a soul that is inhabiting a physical form for a short period of time. And at some point, we'll be done. We'll be done with these physical manifestations, and we go back into being pure light. And that might be scary sometimes to think about that. But my invitation to you is to keep it into perspective, like shark attacks, right? You have 1 in 375 million chance of being attacked by sharks. In your life, the things that scare you, the things that throw you off kilter, the things that completely knock you off your game, they're temporary. But they're an invitation. They're an invitation for you to open up to life, to allow love to flow in, because that's our purpose. Our purpose is to love. Our purpose is to be open-hearted. Our purpose is to embrace life. And so much of our culture causes us to stay small. Ernest Holmes has this beautiful, beautiful quote. It's poetic. You know Ernest Holmes. If you're not familiar with Ernest Holmes, he wrote a book called The Science of Mind. And much of our philosophy is built on that. And so he writes in this thing called You, the wick of your individual life runs deep into the pure being of God. There is but one life, and that life is your life now. No matter what confusion appears at the surface of your life, there is always a place of calm at the center of your being. No matter how turbulent the waves may be on the ocean of your experience, beneath there is a changeless peace. Your being is submerged, not lost in the infinite. Your being is submerged, not lost in the infinite. And here he makes reference to that underworld of the ocean, that whole world that lives beneath the surface of the water that we know so little about. And sometimes what we don't know scares us. And sometimes what we don't know shuts us down and keeps us tight and in the bud. But our purpose here in this thing called life is to blossom, to allow that bud to come into its full expression of life. Holmes is reminding us about the principles of unity and oneness and wholeness, and that there's a greater truth for us than the cultural manufacturing of fear and separation and oppression, that we manufacture these things out of perception versus facts, and that our job as spiritual beings on a human journey is to lean into what it is that we're experiencing, to find out what is there for us to glean from it. When we're working with New Thought Principles, there are a couple of lessons that come out of this chapter. One is to acknowledge the fear that drives us without shame. Acknowledge it. Recognize it. Don't pretend it. Don't shut it down. Recognize it. It's energy that is stagnant, and you're feeling it because it needs to move. The second thing is to claim the power that lies beneath the surface. There's something that's bubbling up. There's some power that wants to move through you. The third is to refuse to other any part of creation, including the parts that we're taught to fear. And the fourth is to affirm unity with all life, even the wild, misunderstood, and dangerous-looking parts. To affirm our unity with it, that there is, despite what we see with our eyes, and despite the perceptions and the things we were taught to believe, like if I go in the ocean, I'm going to get bit by a shark, despite those ideations that have come through our cultural experience, we as a community can bring new and deeper and more profound and more life-affirming ideas to the surface. We can begin to lean into those places that are uncomfortable, because on the other side of that is something surprising, like running into your old boyfriend in Victoria, British Columbia, to rekindling a friendship that's really worth rekindling, because he's a really nice guy. Many of you have met him. Yeah, life will meet you at the level of your acceptance and your willingness. And yeah, there are some scary things out there. I'm not going to deny those. I'm not going to pretend there aren't some scary things going on. I'm not going to pretend there aren't some things that I don't like, that I wish weren't happening. But the point of my power lies in my willingness to lean into those places and to find the spiritual path through them, because the only way through is through, and there's always a spiritual path. Because as Ernest Holmes said so poetically, the wick of your individual life runs deep into the oil of your pure being. Deep into the oil of your pure being. We're here to remember our magnificence and our power and our joy. And much like the shark, the troubling and messy and dark places within us that we have misinterpreted and misunderstood, they are just there to help us be more awakened. So my invitation to you is to be curious, to lean into the places where you're fearful. Lean into those places where you want to shut down. Maybe go back to sleep, pull the covers over your head. Because beneath the surface is a vast world of possibility and potentiality. And you have the power with the divine. You have the power with community to bring about a world that might work for a lot more people, even everyone. That's our vision. It's a really big vision. But we can start right where we're at. We can start by leaning in and being willing to be open, calling upon the divine, knowing the truth, knowing those principles of oneness, of love, that the divine just wants to recreate itself by means of each one of us. These are truths that I can live by. as opposed to being afraid to go and swimming with the sharks. Oh, at the heart of all of it is love, waiting for you to rediscover it over and over and over again, because there are layers to life when we're willing to lean in that will uncover themselves for you as you're willing to be curious and to be a little bit adventurous and to be brave and to trust love. Thank you very much.